Baby Reindeer has been causing so much discussion. So, what can we learn from a relationship point of view? What insights or understanding can we get from the story and the interactions and what happens? What can we take away ourselves from this show? One of the first things that Donnie says when he sees Martha is, I felt sorry for her. And when you think about it, is this really a good starting point for a healthy, positive engagement and a relationship? Because, it's one thing to care for your partner. Most people think that's a wonderful thing to care for somebody, another human being. But when it's more taking care of someone that we see as vulnerable, weak, or needy, what kind of dynamic are we really setting up? And is it possible that that person could then fall into more of a dependent type role in the relationship if they can't stand on their own 2 feet? The next lesson is that predators do not only come in the form of an animal. When we think of predators, we typically think of like the lion in the savannah or maybe a Komodo dragon, stalking his prey. But when you think about the dynamic, particularly what you see with the interaction between Darian and Donnie, we really just see the predator work. But the challenging thing for us is that, unlike a lion, the predator looks like a lovely, cultured, professional person. But the dynamic of having the crosshairs on somebody, seeing someone as vulnerable, so having something that we want from them that we're ready to go and take, even at the cost of that other person. The dynamic to think about really is of a predator and a prey. And we should always remember that relationships can have that quality. Right at the beginning of the story, when they encounter each other, Donnie and Martha, he becomes aware that she's telling an untruth because, on the one hand, she can't pay for a cup of tea, but then she's telling stories about the different properties she has and owning a law firm and this and that. And he is looking on like skeptically, but somehow the penny doesn't drop that maybe he understands that this is an untruth, but it's almost like he doesn't want to understand, or he sets aside the reality of the situation and just runs with it. But here's the thing, if somebody presents us with a blatant untruth in that way, what do we do? Do we take it on board and take account of it, or do we ignore it and pretend that it's not there? There's an interesting segment in the cafe just before Martha really loses her temper, where she's talking about his career and starts something along the lines of, it's not going well, is it? He's struggling. You're unhappy. It's not working for you. And he starts by countering that a bit and says, well, no, not necessarily. But she persists with that. And then it's almost like once he's a bit down, she then takes the opportunity to try and pick him up, almost like she's trying to push him down in order to pull him up as a way of kind of bonding. But the thing to consider is that really a healthy dynamic? Do we want to be putting our partner down in that way just so that we can use that as an opportunity to then connect with them? So that's another thing to really consider. The next thing is about regulating our emotions. So we see a point in the cafe where Martha goes ballistic, where she's holding his hand and he's saying, can I have my hand back, please? Martha, let go of me. And then she explodes in anger and says, I want the name of that person. And it's interesting how her emotions at that point just go completely out of control. Like she's unable to contain her frustration, and it comes out in this extraordinary outburst in the cafe in front of all these people, and everyone goes quiet. And that ability to manage and regulate our emotions is such an important factor. So if we're not able to do that, or if we meet someone and they're not able to regulate their emotions in that way, could it be that we're then waiting for the next time that happens? Abusive behavior is not the monopoly of any gender or any sexual orientation. And Netflix really takes this on and is quite courageous in a sense because it can be seen as a controversial point, but it comes through so clearly. Is that, on the one hand, Martha is abusive, controlling, and we see this, time and time again uh, in the fact the way she bombards him with messages, and she's also very demeaning and controlling, and also physically abusive. She at one point, without going into the details, she sexually assaults him. Um, but also then when you come onto the relationship with Darian, that there's like a really unhealthy dynamic there, like a power control dynamic that plays out. And sometimes when we talk about abuse, it can be labeled or stereotyped as being something that only happens between a man and a woman. Abuse can show up in lots of different ways, in lots of different relationship types.